Guys, it's Jerningam here. Let's see what Boris Johnson has to say about these new prisons he's supposed to be paying the money for and the police on the streets.
If you think it takes a drone to get drugs and phones into prison, think again. As the Prime Minister was shown today, more often the plastic shells of Kinder eggs are used to smuggle things in internally. Often stuffed with drugs and now tobacco too, since smoking was banned in our jails. This stash, detected by an airport-style body scanner, the Prime Minister thinks will make our prisons safer. This is the problem. Violence in our prisons has reached record levels.
And it's good night.
Drugs, readily available in some, the phones being used to film what goes on, finding their way in, even though they're banned.
This is the centre of the jail.
And so, visiting the prison in Leeds today that's one of our most overcrowded, the Prime Minister promised 100 million will be spent.
I don't want to see prisons just being factories to turn bad people worse. We need to be making sure that they're educated and that there isn't a culture of gangsterism and drugs.
How did you get into it? What's your background?
So I am an ex-offender myself.
A few streets from the prison, I met Stacey. She works with men and women who serve time when they're released. She told me they can and do turn lives around. But basics, like having somewhere to live, are a problem.
90% of people that have reoffended, what I've known of, have all said, we've only done it to go for somewhere to sleep. So they're doing it now. They're committing crimes, which is so sad, just for a roof over their head.
And on the scale of violence and drug use in our prisons, here's what she told me.
It's really sad things that I've heard of what's going on in there.
Like what?
Like people fighting each other like dogs to just to gain some spice or somebody else's joke, somebody else's laugh, things like that. And it's just really sad because that's two human beings that are having to do that for their drugs in there.
Whatever the Prime Minister is saying, in reality, this all looks and feels a lot like an election campaign. And before this prison visit, we had promises of more police, tougher sentences, more stop and search powers. Tough on crime is clearly his message right now.
I think he's too busy trying to get votes and not actually worrying about the problem at hand.
Carl was released 2 years ago after serving time for possessing cannabis. He now volunteers with a theatre group that works with prisoners. He credits them with turning his life around. As far as he's concerned, tough talk and more prison places aren't the answer.
See, Boris Johnson talked about getting tough on prisoners and then goes, but we've just built a new prison for you to come to when you've committed your offence. Instead of trying to stop people from wanting to commit their offences in the first place.
Well, earlier today, I sat down with Edward Arger, the Justice Minister, and I asked him where the money for this new announcement was coming from.
The Chancellor has been clear, this is new money, this is affordable,
Where's
and
it
this is
come
money
from?
from grants. We have managed the national finances very carefully, as you'll be aware, since 2010. The national finances are in a strong state. As the Chancellor said, the fundamentals of the UK economy are strong.
The funniest thing is, where are they going to get all the staff from for all these prisons? They're promising new prisons and more policing on the streets. Where are they going to get where's the staff going to come from? Other countries or
You're increasing borrowing.
imported people in?
So where's it
We
coming from?
have the money within the Treasury. This is an affordable.
That's the questions I want to know.
£100 million. It may not seem like a huge amount, but it will make a very, very real difference to security in our prisons, to tackling the challenges faced there that drive violence, the drugs and the phones getting in.
But this is from the fiscal headroom, isn't it?
But this is an
Which
affordable.
isn't a pot of money, is it?
This is a positive
Okay,
story.
well,
This is about investing in security in our prisons.
So the extra 10,000 prison places, is that in addition to our current capacity, or does it also take into account those prisons that are closing?
It is in addition to the current capacity, and it is in addition to the roughly 3,500 places that we've already announced and which are underway being built at Glen Parva and Wellingborough.
So what will our prison capacity be?
So at the moment, if we add that 13,500 to it, at the moment we've got about 85,000 people. If you add to that, we will have a significant investment in
98,500 prison places.
it's higher than
That would put us way ahead of our European comparisons, won't it? I mean, why is it that we lock so many people up, but our record on crime isn't any better?
So when I talk to victims, what they want to see are perpetrators arrested, brought to justice, taken to court,
I've no doubt about that.
And they want to see an appropriate sentence. That's why alongside prison places, we're also investing in probation. I'll be clear about this. We are also, in the audit, investing in the probation service.
So will funding for the probation service be as high as it was in 2010?
And we have changed the model. We're ending the CRC.
This is crazy.
This is not just a matter of funding. This is about the model and what works. That's why the National Probation Services
because you mentioned extra resources.
Yeah, and there is extra resource going in to manage that.
Will it be at 2010 levels, or will it be below 2010 levels?
We're investing what we think is needed to make this new model work. It is a different model, so the comparison is not an effective one.
What the world we live in, eh?
The nature of what we're delivering, and
They try and help people and stuff, and
but it's not just
make it worse, don't they?
Continue to invest in rehabilitation. If you're trying to compare like with like, I don't think you can do that.
I'm just asking you about
in terms of the probation and prison service overall.
I accept the system has changed since 2010. I'm just asking you about the resources that are going into the system. Will there be more, less, or the same resource going into probation?
So in 2010, you'll be well aware we faced a very challenging financial situation inherited from the previous government. We made some very tough decisions around that, but they were necessary. So we will be putting money back in, but there is still work to do around that.
It'll still be less.
We are investing heavily in the system, but we are not back to where we were in 2010 yet.
Thank you. We got there in the end. The point is, you're doing lots of stuff that's popular with people, but none of it seems to be evidence-based. Whether it's on stop and search, longer sentences, any of this stuff, it's all just kind of based on a feeling of what people are telling you.
Well, let's focus.
And that sounds like this is just about electioneering.
Well, let me take an example, if I may, which is today's announcement, £100 million for security measures and the evidence base behind that. The evidence that works is if you look at our high secure estate or the 10 prisons project where we've used these measures, we have seen the amount of those substances coming into those prisons going down. These security measures work, they are effective, and that we can also see the knock-on effect of reducing violence.
Do you think middle-class drug users should go to jail?
I think we're very clear in the nature of the criminal offences that are committed when people sell drugs and take drugs. The law is the law, and I believe that law should be enforced.
You see the problem, though, don't you? That there is a fear that middle-class drug users, like Michael Gove, like Boris Johnson, get away with it, their careers flourish, nobody punishes them. But poor communities are facing stiffer sentences and a crackdown.
I think what we're saying here in terms of sentences for violent crime and sexual offences isn't about rich or poor or anything else. This is about our justice system, which I would argue is the best in the world, being fair and even-handed.
Do you think the cuts since 2010 have had anything to do with the levels of violent crime we're seeing now, both in terms of the social conditions of people affected by this, but also the ability of police to tackle it because their numbers have been slashed?
You're right about police numbers. That is why, having managed the national finances carefully over the past 9 years, we are in a position to make the commitments that the Prime Minister has made. It's a very clear commitment to reinvesting in our police, 20,000 more officers, which will bring us up to the same levels. And I think that will make a real difference on our streets and in our communities. I think that's what the public want to see.
Well, if it would work, they might employ the 20,000 police officers again, like they did in 2010, and then dock them again. That's what the funny thing I think. They're promising all these things, and then when they ain't got the resources and the money, they just do go back to square one. Could be wrong, but there we are. Just thinking.
Yeah. So is that
So we'll try and find another video to show, but
Well, just effort. Now, here's another one. A video of a bin man taking a cake to one of his residents who's 100 has been seen online more than 4 million times. Ben Bird and Mercy Ballard from Kidderminster, they chat once a week when he comes to empty her bin.
He said he'd sing happy birthday to her when she hit 100, and he kept his promise, with his bin man pals videoing the whole event. Mark Goff reports.
Bin man Ben Bird always said to Mercy Ballard that when she reached 100, he'd bring her a cake. And sure enough, true to his word, he did. And the moment was caught on mobile phone video by his colleagues from the Kidderminster Council bins.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mercy. Happy birthday to you. Hey! You alright? You gonna blow him out? Make a wish. To live to 105. You gonna blow them out? Go on. Wow.
What did you think when he arrived with the cake?
I can't tell anybody, love. It's just, I was so full of emotions, and anyway, you know, but
You were very surprised, wasn't you? Even though I told you probably lots of times over the years, when you get to 100, I'm going to be stood there singing happy birthday with a cake. And I just didn't think you actually believed me that I was going to do it, did you?
and then when he says I'm going to live till I'm 107, I picks me
105.
105, oh sorry. I picks me stick up when he's going, I'll say I'm going to shoot you.
Make a wish. To live to 105.
Ben, who's from Wyre Forest District Council, has been emptying Mercy's bins for about 8 years, and in that time they've become firm friends. Every week, every Thursday, I can be walking up the path to get a bin, and the door's open, say, like a foot, and I always say, don't I, where's my favourite lady?
Yeah, when he's coming up the path, there's me stood tickled.
She's always there laughing, and then we just, I empty the bin, we come back up, and then we have 10 minutes, and we just talk
then
about.
Then you changes the bins over for the.
Swap them over, ready for next week.
Yeah.
And then we have a chat about my week and your week and whatever, don't we?
Tells me about his family, and I tell him about mine, and that. Then I'll say to him, you better get going, or I'm going to get into trouble, my lad. He's just a good friend now, you know.
That's lovely.
And
that's so nice to hear.
Is that, if I said the right thing?
That was lovely. Yeah, of course you have. That sounds terrible. No, and you are. I class you as one of my best friends, and yeah.
There ain't many young men that takes interest in an old woman. And he's been such a lovely lad, honest to God.
You're a great old friend.
Oh, yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
We're best friends now, forever.
Yeah, we are best friends, Ben, yes.
Mark Goff, ITV News, Kidderminster.
Well, that was a very nice story with a man and a lady. The man was wishing the lady happy birthday because we're bins, and yeah. More things about Brexit.
Living on these islands, for some of us, is a blessing, for others, a curse. But who'd have thought we'd end up on the therapist's couch in the middle of a nervous breakdown, trying to figure out in our heads and in our politics who we truly think we are. Happy Islanders or feeling cut adrift? My hope is that with the help of a bit of psychoanalytic insight, we can bring ourselves back together. It's quite an amazing building, this, isn't it? Have you been here before?
No, I never have.
Do come in, Nick. Rebel MP Nick Bowles is at a major crossroads in his life and career after leaving his party over Brexit and he's agreed to talk to me about why. What would you like to get out of it? What would, if you walked out of here in an hour and a bit, what would you feel you'd like to get out of it?
So I think there's probably one thing I'm interested by, which is that for various reasons, some of which were my active decision and many of which were determined by events, my political journey has taken a very different direction. And I'm not unhappy about this, but I think it's interesting to perhaps understand why I ended up here.
Yeah. I was thinking this morning, well, I'm having a Brexit bonus doing this, because I wouldn't normally. And you're kind of having a Brexit bereavement. And I think that that's true. There are some winners and there are some losers in this. So I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit about yourself. Why you became a politician. What is the bug?
The bug is, it's totally unpredictable.
Exciting.
You ring on somebody's doorbell, they open the door, and you have 60 seconds, 90 seconds in which to engage them. Which actually I usually think of as nothing to do with politics at all. You're trying to make them think that you're a nice guy.
But it sounds, when you were talking about the ring on the doorbell, it made me think about getting likes on a tweet, or because it's a confirmation, isn't it?
It's conducted almost entirely at an emotional level.
Yeah.
And you're trying to make somebody think, yes, I'd like to have a drink with that guy.
Seduce them.
And somebody wrote a fascinating piece about junk love, and that Bill Clinton's appetite for junk love was closely related to his appetite for junk food. And that sort of an instant hit that you get from a Big Mac or a ice cream was not dissimilar to the instant hit he got from wowing a crowd, and I'm not immune to it.
What's striking is that I guess for you, Brexit has been a watershed. You're going along, you're a junior minister, and then suddenly this bomb explodes.
I thought it was quite likely that, immediately after the referendum, David Cameron would reshuffle his cabinet, and that would perhaps put me in it, and that would be, the next step on my political journey. And as you say, it all blew apart.
Yeah.
I resigned from the government, and then I got cancer again.
So here you are, all your political allies are,
scattered
not much, scattered to the four winds. I wonder where you were then, Nick. Did you just put your head into getting better again? And
it just took me out. I literally, my entire world was circumscribed by the sort of quarter mile around pretty much where we sit, because my flat is here, and King's College Hospital, where I was being treated, is here.
His second cancer diagnosis was a defining moment for Nick. A year out of politics in which he realised...
It's a shame. I had cancer as well, guys, in real life, and I lost my mum cancer, unfortunately. Thousands of people probably lost their mums for cancer, and dads and sisters and brothers and aunties and sisters and brothers and friends and cousins. They probably had the same thing, and best friends and family friends and the members, uncles and sisters and nieces and daughters. It's a shame that people have cancer.
I accept I have failed. I have failed chiefly because my party refuses to compromise. I regret, therefore, to announce that I can no longer sit for this party. The reason I made that little speech, and I didn't plan it. I didn't even know how the sentence was going to be end when I started it. Was that if you go along with it, it will destroy your integrity.
I thought when I looked at you, I thought you felt like you were standing up to bullies. You, at that moment, became intransigent yourself.
There is a dangerous drug
Yeah.
in being the principled man standing on your own against the forces of darkness. You can, it's quite, it's potentially, I think one has to watch out for that.
I suppose it's got to also, a sort of suicidal quality too, because people are prepared to kind of sacrifice themselves, or and we admire that.
Yeah, and that's also why I can recognise the integrity in people on the other side of the Brexit argument, like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker, who have believed this stuff passionately for a very long time. I can't always recognise it on some of the people who were on my side of the Brexit argument.
You've lost quite a lot, but I think it was also an act of freedom. I don't know if it felt like an act of freedom.
Totally.
Yeah. So now what next?
It's been utterly liberating. I had anticipated that there might be some significant moments of regret and feelings of loss and of being bereft. And it slightly astonishes me, but there really hasn't been a single one.
Well, thank you, Nick, very much for talking to me today. It's been really, really interesting.
I enjoyed it, and I learned things too.
Good. Good. Lovely.
Well, what could one say?
Lee is a former British soldier. He did 2 tours of duty in Northern Ireland.
When you leave the army or the conflict ends, there is no process of step down. So in effect, you often leave those veterans in a place where they're still in conflict.
Michael is a former IRA prisoner. He was convicted of murdering a police officer.
25,000 of us have been through the prisons for our actions against the British state during the conflict.
A face-to-face meeting would have been unthinkable before peace.
Hi, Dudley. I'm good.
You good?
Yeah.
Together, they talked about the troubles outside an old army barracks in West Belfast.
So this would have been the responsibility of a company from a 2-year battalion.
Yeah, I'm learning everything.
A total of 300,000 soldiers were sent to Northern Ireland. 1,400 were killed here. Operation Banner was the longest continuous deployment for British troops. But Lee and Michael agree that veterans alone cannot be granted immunity from historical prosecutions.
They know by calling for an amnesty for British soldiers, it becomes a de facto amnesty for all. If they're calling for an amnesty, be honest about what that really means. And that means an amnesty for British soldiers means an amnesty for all.
I would rather have an information retrieval process where families can find out information which they're seeking. And you hear that what most families are wanting to know is the why.
The British Army's welcome was short-lived. Events like Bloody Sunday, when the parachute regiment shot 13 civilians dead in Londonderry, swelled the ranks of the IRA. But the passage of time has forged unlikely partnerships in the pursuit of truth.
We don't know these people as human beings. We only knew them as uniforms. But you got to reconcile, come to terms with the past, and maybe be building as whatever you can at our low level for the future.
As I moved further away from the events, I was able to look at them from a more detached viewpoint. And I suddenly realised that the black and white picture I'd been given, I needed to find the nuance.
Mechanisms for addressing the legacy of the past were put out for public consultation. A clear majority opposed an amnesty of any kind. The victims on both sides are simply not prepared to sacrifice their right to pursue justice. The past is never far from the present here.
But this conversation could not be further from the violence once witnessed on these streets. David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
They were talking about the trouble